listening to Overwatch League Daily, your daily source for Overwatch League news, scores, and more. Here's your host, KickedTripod.
Good morning, Overwatch League fans. This is your Overwatch League daily episode for May 5th, 2018. Community voting for the first phase of the Overwatch World Cup concludes on May 14th. If you haven't heard, I am campaigning for community lead for the United States. If you like the show and want to see content like this for the Overwatch World Cup, click on the link in the show notes and vote for me. I promise to bring some awesome World Cup content to, whatever this is you're listening to on YouTube, podcasts, all that good stuff. Also, Overwatch League Daily is 100% supported by you, the listeners of the show. Head on over to patreon.com/OWL Daily Show to support and get access to awesome perks like early audio episodes, game nights, and more. News has been pretty slow around Overwatch League recently. However, KSV Esports, the parent company of the Seoul Dynasty, has officially rebranded to Gen G. The organization rebrand is designed to fall in line with their vision to set the gold standard for the global esports industry. That's all we have for news, but here's your 2-minute rundown brought to you by patreon.com/OWL Daily Show. For the first match of the evening, the Boston Uprising looked to complete their perfect stage against the LA Gladiators, a team who are hoping to lock in their playoff spot, just coming in right now, sitting in 4th. The Uprising would start with their usual dominance on Volskaya and take a close win on Numbani before the Gladiators would take one on Nepal. On Route 66, Boston would win the map and the series 3-1 and complete their perfect stage, the only team to do so besides NYXL in Stage 2. The Gladiators needed 2 wins to guarantee their playoff spot, but with only 1 map win, they've left it open for the Fusion to sweep the Valiant later today. For the second match of the evening, NYXL defeated the Shanghai Dragons 3-1, and for the final match, it would be the struggling London Spitfire taking on the Seoul Dynasty. London would just squeak by Seoul and take the series 3-2. So here's what we're looking at for the playoffs on Sunday. Boston, NYXL, and the LA Valiant are all locked in for their playoff spots, with the Gladiators locked in for the 4th spot as long as the Fusion don't sweep the Valiant later today. One thing I love about Overwatch League Daily is getting the opportunity to talk to some of the biggest names in competitive Overwatch, like the guys from Overwatch League that you get to see all the time, Sideshow, Bren, Hex, Uber, and of course Crumbs. But while we get to talk with these guys, we also get to chat with up-and-coming talent like my guest today. Andy Neckridge, or PkMnPanda as he goes by online, is an Overwatch color commentator and content creator for most recently working with Broadcast.gg. He joins me today to discuss yesterday's matches and a little bit of a preview for the Stage 3 playoffs. Let's jump right in. All right, Panda, let's jump right into this here. We've got a lot to talk about in yesterday's games, not only because they had heavy playoff implications, but we saw a lot of teams play that, are kind of in and around that upper echelon of Overwatch League right now. So let's start with Gladiators versus Boston. I think this was one of the more hyped matches that we've had, honestly, all weeks. Boston, obviously, this is their clincher. It was their clincher. They clinched it 10-0. Only the second team to do that since NYXL last stage. But we pretty much knew going into this that Boston would probably win the series, as much as LA Gladiators fans, could hold on to hope and stuff. It's, Boston, is looking pretty, obviously pretty good here. But did the Gladiators, this is, I think, the important question, did the Gladiators look like a team that can seriously contend for the top 4 long-term in Overwatch League?
I would think so. I've seen vast improvements in the Gladiators team specifically. Ever since they got Fisher on board as well, they've been bouncing back and forth with the entire play of how to communicate between Bishu and how he communicates when Asher's not on the field as well. Surefour's been stepping up as well in between that banter with Fisher calling him out, saying that he's not as good at Widowmaker as he claims, but Surefour's been showing up, especially in the matches yesterday as well, really showing up strong against Mistakes, of all people, who is known coming into the league as a Widowmaker specialist. Coming up on top of those duels, you got to feel good about that. I just think that once the break comes back and we're going fresh into the next stage, that the Gladiators will come back very strong. They're going to play more together. They're going to practice a lot together. The communication's going to get a lot more, they're going to get a lot more polished. And then when Void's visa is also established and he can come over and play in the league as well, expect only greater things coming out of that tank lineup. And Surefour, the more space that he has, the more heads he can click.
No pun intended there, right?
Nope.
More space. So I want to talk. There's a player on this Gladiators rosters we don't get to talk a lot about, and that's Asher. When we have talked about him in the past, it's always been around his tracer play and his consistency. When he's on, he looks great. When he's not on, people are wondering, why is he in over Hydration again or Surefour or whatever. So he went up against one of the best tracers in the league yesterday in Striker. How did he look?
He definitely has looked better in different matchups. More keynote when he's facing smaller known tracers, in Jake against Houston Outlaws, or I would even say, even Logix, even though Logix is known as a very specialist tracer player, that Asher comes out on that more often than not. But when you face a world-class tracer as a striker, somebody that devotes his entire hero pool to that one hero specifically, it's really hard to match up against it. I mean, just looking at the numbers just played this stage alone, 9 hours for Asher on tracer and 16 for striker. The only person that's next to combat against Striker on my list here would be Soon, of all other flex DPS players that play things other than Tracer on certain maps. But 16 hours compared to the 9, that's enough playtime within its own right to give you a certain advantage. Having 3 solid more % as a win rate, I definitely think consistency is a little bit of an issue for Asher, but it could also be going back to a little bit of that miscommunication that we were talking about as well, and it could definitely play into a factor. When you don't hear the right call, you don't blink in the right spot, you could stay in too deep for too long because you think Fisher's going to be able to make it out. And we see Fisher himself getting caught out more often than not. Sometimes he's a little bit more over aggressive than he needs to be. But I think going back to the lab, going back to my main point, in the middle of the stage here, with their coaches, having a very strong coaching staff behind the Gladiators, behind that big old shield of theirs, I'm sure that they'll be able to figure out some of these consistencies, because Asher's known for going off. And we saw it in the games yesterday, too, in those Tracer duels before Striker finally got a little bit more warm and he got a little bit more confident. Asher was coming up huge in those matchups.
And I think that's something I didn't even put this in our notes, but I want to go one level deeper. We're going to inception this question for a second and say, so, we've seen it's really easy to put a lot of identity right now in the meta into having what is kind of known as a carry tracer. And there's a few teams that don't have a tracer who you look at and go, holy crap, that, the team is kind of lives and dies by this player, for lack of a better term. Houston Outlaws are an excellent example of one of the teams who really don't have a tracer player. We talk about that all of the time. We see it kind of less with, I guess not even London anymore. It used to kind of be that way. Obviously, Shanghai has their own problems in the tracer slot. But I don't think that's a fair.
That's a whole different conversation.
But is Asher good enough on tracer with the combination of the other DPS for the Gladiators to still, be the contender that they were in stage 3? I guess would be my question.
Well, I think the Gladiators are starting to run into a little bit of the problem that, even the LA Valiant are starting running into, bringing on Bunny into the scene as well. They're letting Soon focus on Widowmaker more, so that way they can bring in Bunny where Tracer is more demanding, so that way if Sue needs to play Widowmaker, he can flex onto that role if need be, kind of like that assault hybrid specialist DPS in a Widowmaker and Tracer preferred. But I think Asher is finding himself in such a weird scenario in between Hydration and Surefour, because we know Surefour over the 2 years that Overwatch has been playing at this very competitive scene. He's known for flexing off to a multitude of heroes, and when Asher was visiting back home, Surefour filled those shoes very, very well, even though he would tweet out otherwise. But I would definitely say he did very, very well regardless. And Hydration is known as a projectile specialist as well. So even if need be, if they need that very flexible hero pool to be played out, say to the likes of to Vic, or even we can go even further, and we can even say like Fleta even, or Prophet and Birdring. I think Surefour's your guy, and coming from this Western player, he's really putting his head to the task. And if need be, if Asher is really feeling these inconsistencies that we're talking about, I think sticking Surefour in that spot and letting Hydration come out and really blossom into this team, especially with Void coming in, to note on that again, that team can only get stronger.
Let's switch the focus over to Boston here. Obviously, they had an incredible series yesterday. Who's your MVP in this match for Boston that put them over the top against an LA Gladiators team that, even though they lost 3-1, put up a decent fight?
Yeah, I would definitely side with the desk. And I'm sure most players at home with Gamsu. I think Gamsu is one of the most adaptive players that we have seen in the Overwatch League amongst many main tanks in this stage alone has really come to life. Being able to adapt to the aggressive play of Fisher. We always hear all these main tank talks. Who's the best main tank? Who's always the best at this Winston play? We got talks about Gesture. We got talks about Fisher. We got talks about Muro. And then we got Gamsu, who came into the league unknown, but is leading this team to a charge. And, a good dive is only led by a prominent Goomba stomp that's found by these Winston players. And I think Gamsu being able to understand when a counter dive is needed for his supports and when an aggressive dive is needed, whether it takes him a map or two, he definitely comes to life regardless of the situation. Definitely my player of the match.
And it's kind of funny because most of the Boston Uprising came in relatively unknown. So
that's true.
Kudos again, as if Huck and crew don't get enough credit.
Yeah, they did their homework, that's for sure.
I think a lot of people, it's so funny, right? At first we're like, we see this Boston roster and we're like, what are they doing over there? Like, you realize you can pick anybody in the world, right? Not, and then, they show up in preseason in stage one and you're like, oh, they're not pretty good. I don't think there's anybody in the world who would say by stage 3, this would be a 10-0 team. So
I definitely agree with that. It's like picking all the second and third string picks and just being like, we're going to stick them on a team versus these first string picks. And they're just going to go ham. Yeah.
It was kind of nuts. So kudos.
For sure.
We're going to talk about the playoffs in a bit, and I've got a couple more questions about Boston then, but let's move on to NYXL and Shanghai. That was a game. It happened. Go back and watch it. Let's talk London and Seoul.
There you go. That was it.
So this is going to be a really touchy subject for Seoul fans, and that's Fleta. Fleta, I would say besides Jaehong, arguably, Fleta is one of the players who's kind of garnered the most respect from coaches and analysts and players in the league. In preseason and stage 1, was, I would say, the front runner for the league MVP. But we've seen, especially towards the second half of stage 2 into stage 3, we've seen Fleta get played a lot differently. And we've seen his play. I don't even know if it's play styles change or how other teams have played against Fleta to force Fleta to kind of look differently at the game. But I want to ask you this because you put something interesting in your notes. Do you think that Seoul is playing Fleta the right way right now?
I don't think so. I think that they're misusing his hero pool. I think that they're trying to utilize too many spots of their bench, and they're not really putting these pieces of this grand puzzle together. I mean, we knew when Seoul Dynasty came into the league, their backing being lunatic high, that team that was been so scary through Apex and contender seasons and tournaments upon belief, that they are so scary to face against, that Fleta, when he finally got to join the Epsilons of this team, was going to be godsend. I mean, there was no other way to put it. And he has shown time and time again, he's good on Widowmaker. He's good on those projectile rolls. He has a damn good Genji. And nobody really lets him flow out on that. I mean, they'll put Wakid in, and I'm not saying anything bad about Wakid either, but, you know, when we run into maps like yesterday, he's not Fleta, you know, and anybody would agree with me, too, that, you know, it's the same, that though Wakid is great, he's just not Fleta. And it's kind of like the same situation that NYXL will face when Flower is able to play as well, because once he is fully able to come over to the Overwatch League, that kid's insane, and you gotta let them fly out to the colors. Same reason why Pine, every time he comes out on those little maps like Route 66 yesterday, he gets those huge ovations because the kid is just that good. But I think for a player like Fleta himself, reaching in stage 3, he's hitting that little bit of that surreal phase. That it was a lot of pressure walking in. I don't think more than a third of these players were even ready for all of this pressure of all of the pizzazz behind the Overwatch League, all these cameras in their face, the makeup, and everything. It's crazy, right? I mean, like, it's literally, you were just this figure like me. You're just sitting here playing video games on your computer one day. You know, you're making cool analytical videos, and all of a sudden you're just getting makeup done, and you're getting put on a stage to go play video games in front of hundreds of thousands of people online.
You're in a country you don't know.
It's got to be intimidating.
You don't speak.
Oh my god! Yeah,
I mean, we see it with Korean players all
to...
the time, right? Like they're going back home. They're you know, they're getting a lot of help here to kind of stay grounded. It's really difficult culture change, and then to be able to play at such a high level.
Yeah, I think Uber or some of the other desk and the analysts in Overwatch League said it the best. It's a little bit of a burnout phase too, and it's got to hit you eventually, especially when you're used to that South Korean culture for so long. You just get put in Southern California, and not saying Southern California ain't great. I love the place, but it's just not home sometimes, and you will get burnt out playing Overwatch League scrims. You know, some teams play 8 to 12 hours a day upon end, hardly even talking to their family. Yeah, I can only imagine being the age of 18 to 20, missing my family and stuff like that. So the pressure for Fleta is really on. You know, a lot of Seoul Dynasty fans expect this young player to go huge on these maps, time in and time out. And I think that's where the Seoul Dynasty coaching is coming from. You know, let the player rest a little bit. We've seen that they've come out with tweets and videos, their coaches, time and time, and that they're in it for the long haul. And they're still sitting really good for the season so far. I think as soon as they're done working out these final kinks, especially with Fleta in the roster and off the roster, I think we can only see better things coming in the next stage for this team.
I'm glad you brought up Pine a little bit earlier in your answer, because I think that this is a really good parallel, minus the fact that Pine's obviously more of a substitute specialist player, and Fleta is kind of more like the player that you want in on kind of 90% of your maps. Is we saw when Pine was first getting played, think preseason stage 1, they just kind of let him do his thing, right? And then towards the end of stage 1 into stage 2, I don't know the exact timeline, but remember when they started kind of trading him off onto these different heroes, and he kind of struggled, and he went through some emotional stuff as well. But then we've kind of seen here in stage 3 the resurgence of, all right, Widowmaker, McCree, go have fun, like just do your thing, get the dabs out, and we've seen Pine thrive, and I think it's an astute observation to say for Fleta the same thing probably needs to happen. They need to just kind of let him kind of reel back into his comfort zone a little bit, reel back into the heroes that he's known for, and bring in the support around him to do that. So it's not just like it was back in Apex where it's like Fleta can only do so much on his own, right?
Right. Exactly. You know, and I think every team's kind of finding themselves in that little bit of a scenario. You know, you even see Taimu over in the Dallas field, and I'm so happy to see Taimu back on DPS and Siegel as well. But again, to focus on Taimu, when he comes in on Ilios, and I get to see him play McCree, and I get to see him come out on Ruins on that Widowmaker, it just makes me really happy because it reminds me of Pine. It reminds me of what made Taimu so famous, and it's what made Pine very famous as well, that when you start messing with these players' mindset and their mechanical skills, and you tell them to go focus on different things and different heroes, it's going to put them in a certain mental state that they have to practice more and more and more, and it's going to put them very pressured, and it's going to make it even more difficult for them to perform in that very oppressive state of mind that is that stage. I could only imagine how pressuring it is.
So speaking of comfort zones, Jaehong. Jaehong on Reinhardt. You know, when you think of Jaehong and you do a long list of heroes, I don't think Reinhardt is there that often. I didn't get to watch a ton of him in Apex, which is my bad. I'm sorry. But maybe he did then. But Jaehong on Reinhardt yesterday. How did that work out?
I didn't really know that Reinhardt had any hit scan capabilities to his kit, but you know, hey,
or projectile or whatever.
Yeah, or well, he's got the flame strike.
Well, he's got
nice. Yeah. It makes the things pretty nice, and he was landing for some pretty nice flame strikes on University on Oasis specifically.
Zenyatta and Ana.
Yeah, definitely. You can see that he's more comfortable with Reinhardt. You could definitely tell that he's less comfortable with Winston. This veteran player to Overwatch definitely has played his more time on Reinhardt, and even when he came to life on Junkertown on Irisa, very hard to debunker that four-legged horseman that was Ryu Jaehong today, coming to life on main tank. Still some quirks to work out in the Oldsmobile. That is the clunky Winston main tank dive defense on Volskaya Industries. You saw him; he was caught out on the bottom at one point, looking up at the directly up at the top, deciding, "Well, I can't exactly help you guys out, so I'm just going to keep walking forward anyway." And he got punished for it. You know, you can't. It's hard again to go back to my previous point, taking a main healer shot caller perspective and putting on a main tank shot caller perspective. But I think the speculation that was going across on a multitude of sites might be correct, that the way that Seoul Dynasty operates, they keep working in and out a whole bunch of different players, being supports with Guido, Toby, whether it be DPS, Fleta, Wakid, Munchkin. I think they're going to try to move Ryu Jaehong over to main tank, and that was their point on picking up the third support as well, to work to still have that corresponding communication in between he and Toby at the same time, but instead of it going to be two healers, it's going to be the front and the back line communicating with each other instead. And I think that's a little bit more important coming into the upcoming meta, being so tank heavy. I think Seoul Dynasty is adapting a little bit ahead of the game. And to go back to the previous point, Seoul Dynasty themselves, they're in it for the long haul, man. Depending on the next patch, they could be ready before anybody else is.
And that's got to be, you know, now that you said that, I haven't really considered it, but that's got to be a really valuable skill to have if you're a tank player, to know the depth of thought process and support that you need as a support player. So Jaehong coming in as one of the greatest support players Overwatch has ever seen, moving into this tank role. It's kind of like when you move a catcher to first base sometimes. Like there's just, I know, baseball analogy. Sorry, everybody else in all other parts of the world.
You caught me with it.
Yeah, but you know, it's there's an appreciation of the knowledge, depth of knowledge that you gain from having that knowledge of playing another especially difficult position at such a high level. And if he does and continues to make the transition to tank and continues to do it at an Overwatch League level, like what a valuable skill set to have, to be able to know. Because, you know, as a support main, you can kind of anticipate when you're about to be in trouble, right? And now imagine your tank being able to anticipate when you're about to be in trouble. It's got to be a great thing. So long haul sounds like a pretty maybe risky play, but one with huge payoffs if it comes together.
I think the payoffs are already being shown. I mean, we're talking about the same Seoul Dynasty that went 3-2 against London Spitfire yesterday, right? I mean, we're talking about Ryu Jaehong's showing on main tank on a main stage in professional Overwatch for the first time against the best main tank in the Overwatch League, statistically proven in gesture, and they brought them to a 5th map of Oasis. So, I mean, I think the dividends are already paying off. And to your point as well, the veteran mindset of Ryu Jae-hong, he has the mentality to grind it out, whether or not he's been playing it in scrims or on ladder under different accounts is completely up to him. Practicing main tank, he has to have been doing so, because when he came out on that Orisa and Reinhardt, I didn't really notice all too many differences. There were some haha moments for sure, but you're going to run into that until he definitely plays a lot more main tank than he has, say, the past week.
Right. Let's really quick. I'm going to ask you this question really quick, and then I want to get to our last question and get out of here. So in stage 1, London, 3 perfect series. So that's 4-0 series. London had 4 in stage 2, and they made playoffs, both stage 1 and stage 2. Stage 3, not only did London have only just 1 perfect series, and that was against the Shock last week, they're likely going to finish the stage at 5-5, assuming they don't lose to Shanghai tomorrow. So, should London fans be concerned about, the team who arguably next to NYXL has been the best and most consistent team in Overwatch League as far as record and playoff showing goes? Of course, there's a lot of micro play we can take a look at, but in the macro,
I wouldn't necessarily think so. They were missing one of their star DPS through the entire time. Some of their Sweet 6 starters, if you will, in Birdring. And Birdring missing a couple weeks out of the league definitely hurt them a lot. I mean, they lost maps to teams that you would not expect. And to my point earlier today, getting pushed to the map 5 on Oasis against a team like Seoul Dynasty with a new main tank starting out like that, it's got to be frustrating. And Birdring missing time like that, whatever to the point may be, is very devastating for the London Spitfire. You even said it yourself. They were looking so good through stage 1. They took it by storm. They're taking maps left and right from stronger teams, but it seems that they're almost on a decline now. And I think this goes back to a point I made a little earlier ago about how some teams, such as Seoul Dynasty, are tossing up these different players and sticking them in roles where they're getting confused almost. And when you keep subbing in and out players, communication errors can run into effect. Muscle memory could also play against you. You could think that your DPS is going to be over there, but you're going to sit there and be like, oh, well, Prophet's normally over here, but it's going to be Birdring, and he's going to be doing a whole entirely different thing because, regardless of you playing the same hero, we're still talking about 2 different competitors playing the same hero. Could be 2 different play styles. And I can tell you after watching them for quite some time that Birdring and Prophet, they do play incredibly different, which is why they work so well together.
Last question, and that's playoffs. This is going to be the last episode we have before the playoffs on Sunday. And then on Sunday night, I'm sitting down with Scribe, who is a phenomenal Overwatch analyst and writer. I can't wait to get him on the show and get his thoughts. But here's the playoff picture. Boston, NYXL, and LA are locked in. They're in. There's no way that they can get out, barring some obscure Overwatch League rule we don't know about. However, if the Fusion sweep the Valiant tomorrow, they will take the 4th slot from the Gladiators. It'll actually be tied in map differential, but they've got the better head-to-head record. So that's going to put them ahead. The Fusion have faced the Valiant twice before. They were swept by, we'll call them Valiant 1.0, before they totally changed everybody on the roster in stage 1. And then they stole one in stage 2, 3 maps to 2. The playoff format has changed. So I know we've brought it up a few times on the show, but just as a refresher, the playoff format is now the top 4 teams qualify. The first seed gets to choose their first round opponent. I think that's pretty similar to, I know Apex had something like that where you could choose your opponent. I can't remember.
It's the same as Apex. Yeah.
Yeah. So they get to choose their opponent. So first of all, if you're Boston, and let's assume it's highly unlikely that the Fusion sweep the Valiant tomorrow. That's the point I'm trying to make here. I don't think they do it. If they do, whatever. But assuming that it's the Gladiators on Sunday and you're Boston, out of the Valiant, NYXL, and the Gladiators, who is your choice to take in the first playoff game?
You know, I'd probably give it right back to them. I'd probably take the Gladiators. The only reason being, as all of the teams that was just listed, I'm looking more or less at the off tanks, the ones that deal with being dove the best. Bishu has a lot to handle as far as corresponding language barriers in between Fisher and Surefour and a whole bunch of others in between. And when a coordinated dive at that comes against the sideline of the Gladiators of Shaz and Bigoose, it becomes incredibly difficult for Bishu to time his defense matrix properly because he's always spending it. And you can hear it in their comms when they play it. You protect Fisher, help Fisher. They're really trying their best to protect this main tank to go so huge that they do it so often that main tank just gets a little bit too aggressive. And I think that's where Boston Uprising does it their best. They'll let the first map go, and they'll take a few first team fights, and they'll figure you out whether they have to be more methodical or play more aggressive. It's up to you. And Uprising are more than happy to let Gladiators continue to make the mistakes. But Valiant, they got Space, really, really good Diva player. I'm sure most of you know. and then you know, NYXL, they got Meko. So that's the best defensive Diva in the entire league right now. Not necessarily someone you want to face first. You want to go with that longevity route, and you want to face NYXL in the finals. You want to see who's more tired at the end of it, and you want to push the brink of that one.
Last question. I'm going to give you one word to answer. Do you think Boston walks away as Stage 3 champions?
Absolutely.
Great. Awesome. Panda, I got to thank you so much for being on the show. I'm sorry I took you a little bit longer than I said I would. Really quick, though, you have any projects or things coming up you want people to know about?
No, nothing too big. You know, I'm always streaming, always doing more analytical vids. I am a part of broadcast.gg like yourself. We are broadcasting Open Division. You can find us at broadcast.gg, Twitter, and Twitch at broadcast, or twitch.tv, broadcast.gg, I think. Yeah,
I think correct? You spell out dot. Yeah.
Yeah, you spell out dot and then GG. Regardless of the matter as well, you can find me at Twitter and Twitch itself, PkMnPanda, my name as well. You can find me all over the place, and all my links are linked to my Twitter as well. So yeah, I'm a pretty active user, up and coming, big on the analytical fact, and I am practically in love with Overwatch to the point where I lose sleep watching Overwatch League, and I'm just fine with that. Good.
I'm glad. Well, Panda, thank you so much, and we'll make sure to have to do this again too soon.
Please.
My thanks to Panda for stopping by on the show today. Make sure to follow him on Twitter at PkMnPanda. That's PkMnPanda to find out everything that he's got going on. On Sunday, I'm going to be joined by Scribe. He's an Overwatch writer and analyst. He's going to join me to discuss the Stage 3 playoffs. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, if you like the show, you like the content I'm creating, I'm running for community lead for the United States for the Overwatch World Cup. I would love your vote. The link is in the show notes below. Thank you guys for checking out Overwatch League Daily. If you want to support it, head on over to patreon.com/OWL Daily Show. That's going to do it for me. I'm going to see you guys on Monday morning with another episode of Overwatch League Daily.